The cold case unit at Dunmore County PD occupied a single room on the third floor, lined wall-to-wall with filing cabinets full of unanswered questions. On the morning of February 14th, Detective Morgan Chen was handed a manila folder 20 years overdue. The file simply read, Voss, Elena. Case 204017, unsolved.
Elena Voss was 24 years old when she went missing from her family's lake house on the night of August 9, 2004. She had gone alone to photograph the summer wildflowers. That was the plan, at least. When her father called at sunset, the phone rang out. She was never seen again.
The lake house had been empty for 2 decades. Ivy had swallowed the porch railings. The dock stood rotted, half collapsed into the still black water. From the outside, it looked exactly like what it was, a place where time stopped and refused to move on.
When Elena didn't come home that August, her father Harold called the county sheriff at midnight. A search party of over 200 volunteers combed the lakeside woods for 6 days. They found her camera on the east bank. They found nothing else.
Thomas Kray was the one who organized it all. He printed the flyers, coordinated the grid search teams, and gave a tearful statement to local news. The county gave him a civic commendation. He was photographed shaking the sheriff's hand on the steps of the courthouse. A hero. Everyone said so.
Chen spread 20 years of documentation across her desk. Witness statements, search maps, lab reports, all of it incomplete. She noticed immediately that the original investigators never once considered the case might involve someone close to the search itself. The file was a study in assumptions.
The case had been reopened because of a hairbrush found during a routine property inspection of the lake house attic. Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the State Forensics Lab ran the DNA extracted from the bristles. The result came back in 3 days. It matched a profile in the National Registry. The profile had a name.
Thomas Kray. The DNA in that hairbrush belonged to Thomas Kray. Not just a partial match, a full, undeniable profile. Dr. Tanaka told Chen the statistical probability of error was 1 in 30 billion. There was no doubt. The hero had left his mark in a place he should never have been.
In the 20 years since Elena went missing, Thomas Kray had built a comfortable life. He ran a successful real estate firm in the county seat, sat on the board of 2 local charities, and coached youth soccer every Saturday morning. His reputation was spotless. Carefully, meticulously spotless.
Chen drove out to the lake house alone, badge and notebook in hand. The road had been gravel once. Now it was just 2 tire tracks through overgrown grass. She stood on the warped porch planks and felt the weight of 20 years pressing through the rotted wood beneath her feet.
The attic was accessed through a narrow hatch in the 2nd floor ceiling. It was low-ceilinged and dark, full of old furniture and forgotten boxes. In the corner, behind a stack of water-damaged photo albums, the property inspector had found the hairbrush. Chen photographed everything around the spot where it had rested, untouched for 2 decades.
Elena's father lived alone in a small house on the edge of town, surrounded by framed photographs of his daughter at every age. Harold Voss was 78 years old, walked with a cane, and had waited 20 years for someone to sit across from him and say the words he needed to hear. Chen sat across from him and told him they had a lead.
Harold told Chen something he had buried for 20 years. The night before Elena went to the lake house, she had called him. She sounded uneasy. She said someone had been following her for weeks. She wouldn't say who. She said she didn't want to cause trouble. Harold had told her she was being paranoid. He never forgave himself for that.
Back at the precinct, Chen rebuilt the timeline from scratch. She placed Kray at the lake property on at least 3 occasions prior to Elena's disappearance, documented through his own cell tower records, which had never been subpoenaed in the original investigation. He hadn't just been there during the search. He had been there before.
Kray's original witness statement said he had been at a conference in the city the entire weekend. Elena vanished. He even produced a hotel receipt. But his cell towers placed him within 2 miles of the lake on the Saturday night in question. The conference had been real. The alibi had been engineered.
Chen caught a second inconsistency buried in page 12 of Kray's original deposition. He described that Saturday as overcast and rainy, unsuitable for outdoor photography. Weather records for that day showed clear skies and 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect weather. A small detail. But small details, Chen knew, were where the truth lived. Chen tracked down 7 of the original search volunteers. Most remembered Kray as organized and calm, almost too calm. One former neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Agnes Pruitt, had always found something off about him during the search. She said he kept asking which grid areas had already been cleared. At the time, she assumed it was logistics. Now she wasn't so sure. Chen began to see it clearly. Kray hadn't just organized the search. He had controlled it. He determined which grid squares got the most attention. He assigned teams to areas he knew would yield nothing. He stood at the center of the investigation and pointed every flashlight away from himself. He had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years.
Kray still lived in Dunmore County. He had never left. His real estate office was 3 miles from the courthouse where they had once pinned a civic commendation to his chest. Chen requested a surveillance authorization. It was approved within the hour.
On the 3rd night of surveillance, Kray drove out to the lake house at 11 p.m. He parked on the gravel lane, sat in his car for 40 minutes, then walked to the dock. Chen and her partner watched through thermal binoculars from across the water. He stood at the edge of the dock and stared at the lake for a long time. Then he turned and walked back.
Digital forensics recovered Thomas Kray's archived email account from a backup server. The messages were 20 years old. Between June and August of 2004, he had sent Elena Voss 47 messages. She had responded to 3 of them. The last one she sent read simply, "Please stop contacting me."
The emails painted a picture the original investigation had never known existed. Kray had met Elena at a community art show 2 months before she went missing. He became fixated. He tracked her schedule. He showed up uninvited at 3 separate locations she frequented. When she finally asked him to stop, he went quiet, for exactly 11 days before she vanished.
Dr. Tanaka's team ran one final test. Fibers recovered from Elena's white cardigan, which had been found with the camera. Under spectrographic analysis, a single synthetic fiber that didn't belong to Elena matched the material composition of a type of jacket popular in 2004. The same type Kray wore in every photograph from the search.
Chen laid out every piece for Sheriff Hargrove on a Friday morning. The DNA, the emails, the cell tower data, the fiber, the false alibi, and the weather lie. Hargrove had been sheriff since 2001. He remembered the civic commendation. He remembered shaking Kray's hand. He stared at the evidence wall for a long time before he spoke.
They picked up Thomas Kray at his real estate office on a Tuesday. 2 squad cars, no sirens. Kray saw them coming through his glass office wall. He watched them walk through the lobby. He did not run. He stood up slowly, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door as if he had been waiting for this for 20 years.
Kray was calm in the interrogation room. He asked for water. He asked how the weather was outside. He complimented Chen on her thoroughness. For 40 minutes, he denied everything in complete, measured sentences, each one carefully constructed to give away nothing. Then Chen placed the printed email chain on the table between them.
Something shifted when Chen mentioned the hairbrush, not visibly, not dramatically. Just a flicker behind those pale blue eyes, like a door closing in a house where someone had been hiding. Kray asked for water again. This time his hand was not entirely steady. Chen said nothing. She simply waited.
At 4:17 p.m., Thomas Kray dismissed his lawyer. He said the words into the recording device on his own terms. Slowly, methodically, in the same measured voice he had used to deny everything. What he admitted that afternoon closed a 20-year chapter. Elena Voss had not left the lake that night. Kray had made sure of it.
Chen drove to Harold Voss's house that evening. She sat across from him at the same small kitchen table, with the same photographs of Elena on every wall. She told him what had happened, what Kray had said. Harold Voss did not speak for a very long time. Then he looked at a photograph of Elena and said quietly, "She deserved better."
Thomas Kray was charged and held without bail. The case file for V.S. Elena 2004 Nat 01 points stamped kit Sheft for the first time in 20 years. Detective Chen filed the final report on a Thursday evening. Alone in the cold case room. She turned off the desk lamp past the file and stepped out in the dipped twilight night air. Some cases, she knew, were not solved by brilliance. They were solved by shoot and by the evidence that had simply been waiting to be found.